Clark reporting. It does appear the mood music might be that it doesn't get over the line. We'll get your views on that in a moment. Let's bring into the conversation Paul Carroll, who was a member of Dignitas and joins me now. You have now come away from Dignitas, if I'm getting that correct, Mr. Carroll. Can I ask you why? Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Nick. Yes, I had a conversion, a number of reasons. First of all, I went through the deaths of 3 close family members subsequent to signing the Dignitas agreement. Then we went through the COVID pandemic, where one could argue that the elderly were marginalised and seen as dispensable, and that had a profound effect on me. And then I embarked on writing a novel, which was to follow the paths of 4 people who'd elected for an assisted death. And this was a very human story. It was looking at the reasons why these individuals had opted for this end of life. And were they forced? Was it direct coercion, indirect coercion? And in the novel that I wrote, Shaking Hands with Elvis, it imagined a world which was post-NHS, where a government was actively promoting assisted dying as a means of reducing the health and mental welfare bills on the nation. So, yes, it's a black comedy, and
so this is a novel.
It's an interesting.
Sorry to talk over you. This is a novel. It's not real life experiences, but you were informed. So the relatives that you mentioned, Mr. Carroll, did they use Dignitas' services then, or not?
No, quite the opposite. This was quite instrumental in my change of heart. My mother was in her 90s, had dementia, but not for one millisecond did we want her to leave life earlier than nature intended. And it was quite clear, even in her condition, she had the same desire to hold on to every breath, despite the difficulties of her condition. My mother-in-law, who was only 69, was diagnosed with cancer and unfortunately did not respond to treatment and passed away within 11 months. We had to go through that with her. Again, not for one millisecond did she want to leave this life or ease the inconsiderable pain she was in. She had very good palliative care, wonderful care from the hospital, the NHS, carers, the family. And again, that was quite instrumental in me changing my mind and also inspiring me to explore this subject in more detail.
All right. Well, the book, as you mentioned, is Shaking Hands with Elvis. Do you mind my asking as to your health? Is there a condition that you have at the moment that thinks you might be in a position where you had considered joining Dignitas?
No, quite the opposite. When my partner and I discussed this about 6 years ago, both in good health, and I suppose we were doing our wills at the time, and we thought, oh right, well this was just sort of an adjunct. So I suppose you could say we were being hyper efficient, but okay. In the end, I don't think we really realised the implications of it. It was interesting, the point made earlier on about as people get older, they look at this in a different way to when you're younger. But no, I taken it out. Let's call it an insurance policy. Okay. But now it's an insurance policy I do not need or want.
Finally, what you've heard about the legislation, possibly what you've read about the proposed legislation, how does that inform your view now? What are the points you'd like to take out of that, Mr. Carroll?
Well, I'm very concerned about I'm glad that it's being debated. I do hope the bill is scrutinised in great detail. I've looked at the paper yesterday. It keeps being referred to as a slippery slope. We've heard that expression many times. A better expression is the ski slope. Because if one only has to look at what's happened in other countries around the world to see what happens when you devalue, which I think you do, when you desensitize people to an artificial end of life, that brings lots of people into play. People who cannot receive healthcare, the depressed, the people who have lost the will to life, and the poor. So I hope these aspects are looked at in the debate, as well as what the paper outlines in great detail, which is the process. It doesn't look at the great issues surrounding this bill and the ramifications further down the road.
Paul Carroll, thank you for sharing so much of the work you did to do that book and also explaining why you were a member of and then have come away from Dignitas. So the research shows that there is considerable support. The mood in Westminster, as our political editor Natasha Clark rightly interpreted, is that possibly to go the other way. You'll have your say after the 8:17 LBC News headlines. Jenny Barsby News headlines. Jenny Barsby News headlines. Jenny Barsby News headlines.